My name is Diana Miller, and I never imagined my own family would be the ones to betray me in the worst possible way. I am 28 years old, living in Atlanta, and working as a financial analyst at one of the top firms in the city. The irony of my story is not lost on me. I spent my days managing multi-million-dollar portfolios for clients while my own family was secretly draining my personal accounts behind my back. For nearly 10 years, I silently carried the burden of my family's financial irresponsibility. It started small: a phone call from my mother about an overdue electric bill, a text from my father about car repairs he couldn't afford, my older brother Brandon needing money for rent after losing yet another job. Each time I told myself it was temporary. Each time I believed them when they promised to pay me back. I was always the responsible one, the dependable daughter, the successful sibling who made something of herself. While Brandon struggled to hold down even the simplest jobs, I excelled in finance, climbing the corporate ladder faster than most of my peers. My parents never failed to remind me how proud they were of my success, how lucky they were to have such a generous daughter, how fortunate our family was to have someone like me to help during difficult times. What I didn't realize was that I wasn't helping them through difficult times. I was enabling a lifestyle of financial dependency that would eventually consume nearly all of my savings and emotional well-being. The truth began to surface on an ordinary Tuesday in April. I remember the weather was unusually warm that day, the kind of spring warmth that arrives too early and makes you worry about what summer will bring. I was sitting at my desk during lunch break, reviewing my monthly budget as I always did mid-month. Everything looked normal until I noticed a recurring transfer to my parents' joint account. $8,000 each month for the mortgage on the family home. The home I grew up in. The home they promised would one day be part of my inheritance. Something made me pause that day. Perhaps it was the conversation I had with my colleague Sarah earlier that week about financial boundaries with family. Or maybe it was the growing unease I had been feeling each time my mother called with another emergency. Whatever it was, I decided to log into the joint account I shared with my parents to check if the mortgage payment had gone through as scheduled. What I saw on that screen changed everything. According to the transaction history, no mortgage payment had been made in 8 months. 8 months of $8,000 each. $64,000 missing. My hands started shaking. My chest tightened. The room seemed to spin around me as the numbers on the screen blurred together. I took a deep breath and scrolled through the transaction history. Instead of mortgage payments, I saw cash withdrawals, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, expensive purchases at designer stores, restaurant bills for hundreds of dollars, and most shocking of all, multiple transfers to an account labeled simply as Brandon's savings. My brother Brandon had never saved a dollar in his life. At 32 years old, he still lived in our parents' basement, jumping between odd jobs and grand business ideas that never materialized. My parents always made excuses for him. He's just finding his path. He's an artist at heart. He's too creative for the corporate world. Meanwhile, I had been working 60-hour weeks since college graduation, saving carefully, living modestly, all while sending thousands of dollars home every month. I printed the transaction history and left work early, something I never did. The 20-minute drive to my parents' house felt like hours. My mind raced through years of financial support. The student loans I paid off for them, the credit card that I cleared, the vacations I funded, all while being told they were just getting back on their feet. All while watching them live more lavishly than my careful budget allowed me to live. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Brandon's new car parked outside, a luxury SUV I hadn't seen before. My stomach dropped as I realized this was likely where some of my money had gone. I walked into the house without knocking. They were all in the living room. My mother was arranging flowers in an expensive-looking vase I didn't recognize. My father was watching golf on a television that appeared much newer and larger than the one I had bought them last Christmas. Brandon was sprawled on the couch, absorbed in his phone. They looked up in surprise. I never visited unannounced in the middle of a workday. My mother smiled warmly. "Diana, what a lovely surprise. Is everything okay? You look pale." I placed a stack of printed bank statements on the coffee table. I know about the mortgage. The room went silent. My father muted the television. Brandon suddenly seemed very interested in his fingernails. My mother's smile faltered but didn't completely disappear. What do you mean, sweetheart? I pointed to the papers. I've been sending $8,000 every month for the mortgage, but you haven't made a payment in 8 months. Where is my money? My mother glanced at my father, her smile now completely gone. They exchanged a look I had seen many times before, the look they shared when they were deciding which lie to tell me. My father cleared his throat. Diana, you have to understand. We've had some unexpected expenses. Your brother needed help starting his business. We were going to catch up on the payments. We just needed a little breathing room. Brandon finally looked up from his phone. Yeah, sis. My crypto trading company is about to take off. I can pay back everything in a few months. Double it even. I looked around the room, at the new furniture, the expensive electronics, my brother's designer clothes, and I felt something break inside me. 10 years of blind trust shattered in an instant. How long? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. How long have you been doing this? My mother stood up and approached me, arms outstretched as if to hug me. Diana, please. We're family. Families help each other. Remember how we supported you through college? I stepped back from her embrace. You didn't support me through college. I worked 2 jobs while studying full-time. I graduated with $40,000 in student loans that I paid off myself. And then I paid off your loans too. My father stood up now, his voice taking on the stern tone he used when I was a child and questioned his authority. Now listen here, young lady. Your mother and I gave you everything. We sacrificed for years so you could have opportunities. And this is how you repay us, by coming in here and accusing us. I felt my resolve strengthen as his false narrative washed over me. I had heard this story my entire life. The story of my parents' great sacrifice. The story that kept me sending money month after month. The story that wasn't true. I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm stating facts supported by bank records. You've stolen $64,000 from me. The house is now 8 months behind on mortgage payments. It's facing foreclosure, and based on your reaction, you had no intention of telling me. My brother finally stood up, putting his arm around our mother who had started to cry. Always the dramatic one, Diana. Always. Making everything about you. Mom and Dad needed help, and I needed capital for my business. We're going to pay you back. Why are you making such a big deal about this? I looked at Brandon, really looked at him, and saw for the first time what he truly was. Not the creative genius my parents had always described, not the entrepreneur temporarily down on his luck, but a 32-year-old man who had been coddled and enabled his entire life, who had never faced consequences for his actions, who saw nothing wrong with taking what wasn't his. I turned back to my parents. You have 30 days to either pay the mortgage current or sell the house. I will not be sending any more money. I will not be paying any more of your bills. And I will be consulting with a lawyer about the funds you've misappropriated. My mother's tears instantly dried up, replaced by a cold anger I had rarely seen. After everything we've done for you, after all the sacrifices, you would throw your own family into the street. What kind of daughter are you? The kind who just woke up, I replied, turning to leave. My father called after me. If you walk out that door, Diana, don't ever think about coming back. Family stands by family. If you can't understand that, you're no daughter of mine. I paused at the doorway, the weight of his words hitting me like physical blows. For a moment, I felt like the little girl who would do anything to earn her father's approval. Then I straightened my shoulders and walked out. That night was the longest of my life. I sat in my apartment surrounded by the modest furnishings I had chosen while sending the bulk of my income to my family. The one-bedroom apartment I rented instead of buying a home of my own because I was helping my parents keep theirs. I scrolled through years of text messages from them. Thank you. Messages when I sent money. Desperate requests when bills came due. Loving family photos during holidays. Had it all been manipulation? Had they ever truly loved me? Or was I just their financial safety net? I barely slept. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. Then I did something I should have done years ago. I called Professor Campbell, my college mentor who had tried to warn me about my family's dependency when I was still a student. I remembered dismissing her concerns back then, defending my family's honor. Now I needed her wisdom more than ever. She answered on the third ring, her voice exactly as I remembered it. Warm, steady, no nonsense. Diana Miller, it's been too long. I broke down as soon as I heard her voice. Through tears, I explained everything. The years of financial support, the discovery of the mortgage fraud, the confrontation with my family, their reaction, my confusion and grief. Professor Campbell listened without interrupting. When I finally fell silent, exhausted from the emotional purge, she spoke with the clarity that had guided me through difficult academic challenges years before. Diana, what your family has done is not just morally wrong. It's legally actionable. This isn't about loyalty or love. It's about exploitation and theft. You need to protect yourself now. But they're my family. I protested weakly. Family doesn't do what they've done to you, she replied firmly. Real family supports each other's growth and well-being. They don't drain you dry and blame you for noticing. We talked for over an hour. By the end of the call, I had a plan. First, I would secure all my financial accounts, removing any access my family might have. Second, I would consult with a lawyer about recovering the misappropriated funds. Third, I would document everything in case legal action became necessary. And finally, I would seek therapy to help process the emotional trauma of this betrayal. Over the next week, my phone exploded with messages from my family. My mother sent tearful voice messages about how I was breaking her heart. My father's texts oscillated between angry demands and grudging apologies that never actually acknowledged wrongdoing. Brandon sent links to his business website, promising I would be the first investor paid back when he hit it big. I read and listened to every message but responded to none. Instead, I focused on executing my plan. I closed the joint accounts. I changed passwords on all my financial platforms. I gathered years of bank statements showing the pattern of transfers to my family. And I found a therapist who specialized in family trauma. The lawyer I consulted was direct about my options. I could pursue criminal charges for fraud, file a civil lawsuit to recover the funds, or attempt to negotiate repayment without court involvement. Each path had advantages and disadvantages. Criminal charges would likely destroy any possibility of reconciliation. A civil lawsuit would be public and expensive. Negotiation might not work given my family's reactions so far. I decided to try one more conversation before making a legal decision. But this time, I would not go alone, and I would not go unprepared. 2 weeks after the initial confrontation, I returned to my parents' home. With me was Professor Campbell and my cousin Eliza, the only family member who had ever seemed to recognize the dynamic between me and my parents. I also brought complete documentation of every financial transaction between myself and my family for the past 10 years. And I brought a letter from my lawyer outlining the potential legal consequences of what they had done. My parents were shocked to see me with company. They had clearly expected me to return alone, contrite, ready to resume my role as the family ATM. Brandon wasn't there, which didn't surprise me. He always disappeared when real consequences loomed. My mother tried to hug me as if nothing had happened. Diana, we've been so worried. You haven't been answering our calls. I stepped back, maintaining professional distance. I'm here to discuss the financial situation and possible resolutions. This is Professor Campbell, my mentor, and you know Cousin Eliza. My father looked annoyed at the presence of witnesses. This is a family matter, Diana. We don't need outsiders involved. Professor Campbell smiled politely but firmly. Diana asked me to be here, and I'm happy to support her. I've known your daughter since she was 18, and I care deeply about her well-being. Eliza simply nodded at my parents, her expression making it clear whose side she was on. We sat in the living room, the same room where everything had imploded 2 weeks earlier. I placed my documentation on the coffee table next to a photo of me at my college graduation. The irony wasn't lost on me. My graduation photo prominently displayed in the home I had effectively paid for. I've consulted with a lawyer, I began, watching their expressions shift from annoyance to alarm. What you've done constitutes fraud and theft. I have documentation of $547,000 transferred from my accounts to yours over the past 10 years. That includes the $64,000 specifically for mortgage payments that were never made. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Diana, you can't possibly be thinking of suing your own parents. I'm thinking of holding you accountable, I replied evenly. You had choices. You could have been honest about your financial situation. You could have lived within your means. You could have encouraged Brandon to support himself. Instead, you chose to take advantage of my love and trust. My father leaned forward, his voice quieter than usual. What exactly do you want, Diana? I want 3 things, I said, removing a document from my folder. First, I want a legally binding repayment agreement for the misappropriated mortgage funds. Second, I want you to sell this house and pay off the mortgage. And third, I want a written acknowledgement of what you've done, signed by both of you and Brandon. My mother started to cry, but I noticed how her eyes remained dry. The same performance I had seen countless times when she wanted something from me. My father's face reddened with anger. This is extortion, he sputtered. We're your parents, for God's sake. Professor Campbell spoke up, her voice calm but authoritative. Actually, Mr. Miller, this is remarkably generous given the circumstances. Diana could pursue criminal charges. The documentation here would make for a very straightforward case. My father turned to Eliza, perhaps hoping for support from another family member. Eliza, you can't agree with this. Family helps family. Eliza met his gaze steadily. Yes, Uncle Robert. Family helps family. But that's not what's been happening here. Diana has been helping you, and you've been taking advantage. I've watched it happen for years and said nothing. That makes me part of the problem, and I'm sorry. Diana, her unexpected apology brought genuine tears to my eyes. For so long, I had thought I was alone in seeing the reality of my family dynamic. Knowing that Eliza had seen it too was both validating and painful. Why hadn't she said something sooner? But then, why hadn't I? The discussion continued for hours. My parents cycled through denial, anger, bargaining, and eventually a grudging acceptance that they had no better options. By the end of the day, they had signed the repayment agreement and the acknowledgement of their actions. They also agreed to list the house for sale within 30 days. As I prepared to leave, my mother grabbed my arm. You'll regret this, Diana. Someday you'll need us, and we won't be there. I gently removed her hand. I've needed you my entire life, Mom. I needed parents who would put my well-being above their desires, who would teach me healthy financial habits instead of exploiting mine, who would love me for who I am, not what I could provide. I'm not the one who should have regrets here. The weeks that followed were some of the most challenging of my life. Despite the signed agreements, my family continued their emotional campaign. Extended family members called to tell me how heartless I was. Family friends reached out to express their disappointment. Brandon posted vague but pointed comments on social media about ungrateful siblings and family betrayal. But for every negative reaction, there was also support. Eliza stood firmly by my side, even when it cost her relationships with other family members. Professor Campbell checked in regularly, offering wisdom and perspective when I felt myself wavering. And my therapist helped me untangle years of manipulative family patterns, gradually freeing me from the guilt that had driven my decisions. For so long, the house sold faster than expected in a hot real estate market. After the mortgage was paid off, there was even a small profit, which went toward the repayment of what my family owed me. Brandon was forced to move out of the basement, and for the first time in his adult life, had to find his own housing. My parents downsized to a rental that matched their actual income, not the inflated lifestyle my contributions had funded. With my finances finally my own, I made changes to my life as well. I used some of the repaid funds as a down payment on a modest but charming 2-bedroom condo. I started contributing the maximum to my retirement accounts. I took my first real vacation in years, a solo trip to Portugal that helped me reconnect with myself outside of my family role. 6 months after that fateful day when I discovered the mortgage fraud, I received an unexpected email from Brandon. Unlike the manipulative messages of the past, this one seemed different, more reflective. He asked if we could meet for coffee. After consulting with my therapist, I agreed but chose a public location and limited the time to 30 minutes. Brandon looked different when I saw him. Thinner, more serious, less like the entitled man-child I had last seen in our parents' living room. "Thanks for meeting me," he said as I sat down across from him. "I wasn't sure you would." "I'm not sure why I did," I admitted. He nodded, accepting my honesty. "I got a job," he said after a moment. "A real one, with benefits and everything, at that tech company downtown." I raised my eyebrows, genuinely surprised. "That's good, Brandon." He stirred his coffee needlessly. "I've been seeing a therapist too. She's helping me understand some things about myself, about our family." He looked up at me. "I'm sorry, Diana. I really am. I took advantage of you for years. I let mom and dad convince me it was okay because you were the successful one, because you could afford it, because you owed it to the family. But it was wrong." I sat in stunned silence. In all our years, I had never heard Brandon take responsibility for anything. Never heard him apologize without a qualifier or an excuse. I didn't know what to say. "I don't expect forgiveness," he continued. "I just wanted you to know that what you did, setting those boundaries, it was the wake-up call I needed. Probably what we all needed." Our coffee stretched beyond the planned 30 minutes into 2 hours of the most honest conversation we'd ever had. Brandon told me about his struggles finding his place in the world, living in the shadow of my success, using our parents' enabling as an excuse to avoid growing up. I shared my perspective too, the pressure of being the responsible one, the loneliness of always giving without receiving, the pain of discovering how conditional my family's love had been. By the time we parted, something had shifted between us. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but a fragile bridge beginning to form over the chasm of betrayal. A possibility that someday we might find a new way to be siblings. One built on mutual respect rather than dependency and resentment. My parents were a different story. Despite multiple attempts at mediated conversations, they remained entrenched in their narrative of parental sacrifice and filial ingratitude. They made the minimum payments required by our legal agreement, but refused to acknowledge the emotional damage they had caused. For my own well-being, I eventually had to accept that a healthy relationship with them might not be possible, at least not in the foreseeable future. But as one set of relationships receded, others flourished. My friendship with Professor Campbell deepened into a mentor relationship that enriched both our lives. My bond with Eliza grew stronger as we supported each other through family holidays and milestones now spent apart from our larger family circle. And I formed new connections, friendships and professional relationships unburdened by the financial drain and emotional exhaustion that had limited my social energy for so long. A year after discovering the mortgage fraud, I sat on the balcony of my condo, watching the Atlanta sunset. My phone buzzed with a calendar notification. Mortgage payment due. But this time, it was my own mortgage, my own home, my own life. I reflected on the painful journey of the past year. The shock and betrayal of discovery, the agony of confrontation, the grief of losing my family as I had known them, the slow rebuilding of my financial security and emotional well-being, and through it all, the gradual reclaiming of my own worth. For nearly a decade, I had defined my value by what I could provide to others, especially my family. I had measured my success not by my own happiness or well-being, but by my ability to solve problems that weren't mine to solve. I had confused sacrifice with love, dependency with connection, obligation with relationship. The hardest lesson wasn't financial, though $64,000 of mortgage fraud certainly hurt. The hardest lesson was understanding that true family supports rather than exploits, that healthy love empowers rather than diminishes. that loyalty to others should never require the sacrifice of loyalty to yourself. I still have moments of doubt and guilt, days when I question whether I did the right thing, times when I miss the family gatherings and shared history, complicated as they were. But then I remember the relief of looking at my bank account and knowing that every dollar is mine to use as I choose. The peace of answering my phone without dread. The freedom of building a life that reflects my own values and priorities. Financial betrayal by family creates a unique kind of pain. It's not just the loss of money, though that matters. It's a violation of the fundamental trust that family is supposed to represent. It's the realization that the people who should protect you have instead seen you as a resource to exploit. It's the lonely journey of setting boundaries that others call selfish because they benefited from their absence. If you're listening to my story and recognizing your own family dynamics, know that you're not alone. Know that questioning unhealthy patterns doesn't make you disloyal. Know that loving your family doesn't require sacrificing your financial security or emotional health. Have you ever questioned if loyalty to family means sacrificing your own well-being? The answer is no. True loyalty, true love, true family connection should lift everyone involved. It should never require one person to continuously drain themselves for others. That isn't love. That's exploitation. And recognizing the difference was the most painful, but ultimately most liberating lesson of my life. My name is Diana Miller. For 10 years, I was my family's bank. Today, I am my own person. And while the journey here broke my heart, it also set me free.